Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's evening here in Pennsylvania, so we've got a night session going on tonight, as you can tell by the lighting. But today I'm going to be talking about my audition with Genesis on the Studio Memoirs. It's a good story, I think. And it started out, it was when Phil Collins, I don't know what the politics was again, or whether he just got, I don't know what was going on, but Phil had like kind of wigged out a bit, I think, and he'd left the band, or I don't know what. I don't know what he'd done. And I got a call. I think Nick Davis, the engineer for Genesis, had put me up to it because he engineered. He was with Steve Hillage when we did the Once Around the World album, and he engineered, like Kiss Like Judas, Midnight. I think Yellow Christian and Rosemary. There's a bunch of stuff that he engineered. So I'd known Nick for a long time, and it's very cliquey, the studio world in England. It's usually the public school boys. They're kind of like, hello. They're very. It's what we call, they all went through the same kind of, what they call privileged abandonment. They were sent off by their parents when they're like 8 years old, and they had like a weird upbringing, so they're very emotionally closed. All them guys from that type of, rearing, that culture, that British culture, they're trained to kind of take over the world and be like, it's that kind of, that there's a vicious kind of, the chariots, that whole Zulu thing and all, they've got that to it, There's a viciousness about that old English kind of upper class Englishness. They were vicious, man. They went round and took over the world. And so that kind of emotionally cold atmosphere is what them guys were brought up in. And I think, so often, they get cliquey like that. I remember talking to Steve. I've never actually spoken to Phil about this at all. But I remember that in books, and I've seen them in interviews, saying that they never felt a part of Genesis because I just don't think it's possible for old Tony and Mike or Peter, any of them guys, to include anybody in. It's not because they're not nice or anything. They're probably decent blokes and all that, but they're definitely emotionally cut off, and they're definitely not trying to help. There's no kind of emotional warmth from them. They're not going to sit down and go like, "Oh man, that's amazing, well done, well done." The most you'll get out of old Tony is like you see Tony like struggling to be emotional, like, yes, we'll accept that. That's kind of fine. Yeah, it was fine. It was fine. It was fine. They're kind of always doing that stuff. So it was fucking weird for me to begin with, even be going in with that lot. Because they're not somebody I'd go on holiday with, I'd had a dinner with Mike Rutherford earlier on because my girlfriend in New York was his best friends with Mike's wife, American girl. Can't remember what her name is now. I can't remember. But we had dinner out one night, and it was like, dude, it's just not a lot of fun. There's not much going on. They don't really say much. There's not like there's not a lot of colour. It's like, it's very kind of stoic and very like, well, there's no like, put the kettle on, you fat bastard. There's none of the culture that we grew up in. There's none of that. And so here you've got this, and also I'm not, I'm not at all intimidated by anything. So I'm not going down there to be like frightened and all. Fuck that. I'm not doing that. I'm just going to go. And I said to Phil, Phil Beaumont, he said, they want you to go down on Thursday or something. I think I was recording the Man album at Phil's, I think. And I said to Phil, I can't sing that. I said, I can do that Gabriel stuff, like dead easy. I know I can do that with my eyes closed. I could sing it better than him. I said, but the Phil Collins stuff, there's no way I can sing that. And Phil said, well, this is what they want you to learn. It was all the Phil Collins songs. And I'm like, no, we had In the Cage, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, I think, or something like that. But it was all Mama, and I was just like, but how can I not do that? After growing up as a fan of Genesis, how can I not go and be in the studio, sit in the studio with Genesis and sing one of their songs? Even if I was crap, how can I not do it? And so I couldn't not do it, but I knew there's no way I couldn't do it. I knew I couldn't do it. I can't sing Phil Collins songs. I just can't. He's screaming all the time. Like it's incredibly high-pitched screaming. I can't do that. So I get in the car and I go down, and we go down and we pull in their farm, And it's all kind of like weird and like, you know, they're all like they're just not very friendly. Like, hello. Then, you know, nobody's going out to the... Nick Davis was real nice. Nick's like, hey, Frank, how you doing? And all this stuff. But they're not like making any effort to like make you feel comfortable. And I think they're that uncomfortable in themselves. I don't think they know how to be comfortable. You know, Steve Hackett is the nicest guy you'll ever meet. But he's not like that. Like, Steve doesn't have that temperament. Steve's like and I'm sure Phil's like a real nice guy. He's like he's just a sweet man. But that lot, you know, that would be the privileged abandonment lot, the public school boys, damn, dude, it's like, that's some tough going. Now, I know they had a tough time with themselves even because, you know, Steve, you know, I've seen interviews anyway where they said like there was a lot of door slamming and screaming and Peter was slamming doors because Tony wouldn't include his lyrics and you know. So here I am, I'm going down into this and I love them. I love them. I just love them. Like, they're the greatest thing ever for me. Them early Genesis records, they formed the feeling tone of my early life. I love them. And I'm going down. And so I'm sitting there thinking like, and I'm a pretty intense guy in terms of, I know I sound like a big brat and all that, but I'm actually very aware of what's going on. You know, so I'm going down, I'm in the car and I'm like, wow, I'm going to go down. These are my heroes. And I can't actually sing what they want me to sing, but I'm just going to go anywhere. And I'm thinking like, well, how am I going to like sing that? Because honest to God, I'm not making this up. I can't sing it. I honestly can't sing it. My voice doesn't do that. Like, it just doesn't do it. But I'm going anywhere. And I'm thinking like, oh God, this is going to be terrible, man. I'm going to go in there and they're going to like, get the fuck out of here. And you know, they were all right in the end. They were kind of all right, but you know, it was very, you know, it wasn't a very friendly atmosphere in terms of it wasn't very northern. It wasn't very northern council house type ways. You know, you go and see even if you go and see like some, you know, the Cockney guys from down south, like, all right, mate, you know, there's always somebody, hey, geezer, what's, you know, it was none of that. It was like this kind of like, and one of the things, you know, one of the things that pisses me off about that whole generation of them, it's like, it's like when you like somebody, they feel like they've got a license to be an asshole to you. You know, when fans come up to me and go, oh, I love your work, I'm always very polite. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. I appreciate you saying that. But that lot, that whole generation, all of them, like Roger Waters, and like if you give any clue that you really like them and all that, they kind of look at it as if like, well, you know, they as if they're like above you or something. It's like, dude, get real. But so there was that. And it was just like, you go down there. I'm in there with my heroes. I sang in the cage. I was all right. But the other ones, I was crap. And but and it was all right. It was actually all right. I honestly couldn't do it. And I knew in my heart of hearts, this was the thing, that I could write a better album with them two than anybody else could. And I know that sounds completely arrogant, but I honestly can. Because Tony Banks needs somebody to fight with. He's an Aries. He can't have his own way. If he gets his own way, he's crap. His solo albums are kind of like that. They're just kind of like, well, you got to fight with him. He needs an Amber guy who'll fight with him. I wouldn't back down from him. No chance. And and I've got ideas of my own that he would that's equally as good as what he's got. I'm not like from a lesser god than Tony Banks. I can hold my own with anybody in that arena. I'm very confident in myself like that. So I knew in my heart of hearts, he needed somebody to fight with. Mike Rutherford's a Libra. He can't make his mind up for anything. And that was really interesting to see that what came out in the studio, they said that he would go around 50 different amplifiers and 50 different guitars and arrive back at the ones he started with because he can't make his mind up. It's so Libran. But Tony's an Aries and he's very aggressive and he's very assertive. And but he needs somebody to fight with. He always had old Peter to fight with. And Phil was the songwriter really in that band, like in terms of, he was the kind of the pub guy, the pub Motown guy, the guy who knew about Motown and stuff. He could bring that to the table. That's why they were so successful, because of what Phil did. But when Tony was by himself, it just wasn't working for him like in the way when he had people to fight with. And I knew in my heart of hearts I could get a better album out of him than anybody. I just knew it. I just knew. And I'll still to this day say that. I would have got a better album out of him than anybody else. But it was very difficult for them to deal with a northerner. You know, it was probably like, it was very difficult for them. They'd never dealt with anybody like me before. And I wasn't weird at the rehearsal, at the audition or anything. I wasn't like I was weird. But, you know, like they would have a much harder time with me than I would. I'd just joke with them, but they just don't have the capacity to do that. It's all just very, you know. And it was really interesting, like watching what Steve says, watching what Phil says about the early days, because it was the same thing I experienced. And then I watched what Chester Thompson said, not recently, it was the same thing. The emotional environment is very, very weird. Like they have a weird emotional environment around them. You don't know what's going on, and you never know whether they like you or not. They don't have the capacity to reach out and have affection. You know, it's very odd, very odd. You know, and so, sorry, there's people calling me all the time, sorry. So that was my audition, and I left, and I just laughed to myself. I just thought that was fucking insane. You know, because growing up, come on, stop mailing me, stop. Come on. You know, like growing up with all that lot was insane, and there I am in the studio with them in this place that I'd heard of, the farm and the blah blah blah, blah, and I'm like, yeah, that was that. You know, so that was my story with Genesis, and but I do love them. I love them. I don't care what they do. People go like, Genesis suck now, and I don't care. I don't care. I think they did enough. They did enough music in them first 5 or 6 albums that I don't even care. I don't care if they come out with the most, you know, shut up your face and they do a cover of it by Joe Dulce. I don't care. I love them. I just love them. I think that, you know, that's my life. You know, they're weird and they're all emotionally this and that, and you know, they did this. I don't care. I just love them. I thought what they did was just genius in the early days, and I'll remember them that way. But my audition was great. It was good. And I enjoyed it. It was very interesting and, you know, full of psychological things for me on the way back up, and thinking about myself, thinking about my situation on the way back up and what it was and how they were. And but, you know, if I had to put it down to a single sentence, I would say I wasn't capable of doing the job for them. That's the truth. That's the real truth. I wasn't up to the job, you know, what they wanted. They wanted, you know, like the Phil Collins thing and all that, or a nice singer. They wanted a nice singer, you know, like, you know, there's them guys who just sing nice. They're nice singing. I can't do that. I'm not good enough to do that. I just do that. I just do what I can, you know. But it was great. It was really good, and it's in my life. It's in my history banks, and I loved it, and I love them. And I was very appreciative that they actually asked me to go down. I was flattered. And, you know, I know Tony liked Kiss Like Judas and all that stuff. Tony liked a bit of It Bites music. I know he played it. That's why he hired Dick Nolan. He hired Dick on bass because of the It Bites stuff, you know, because he heard It Bites and he loved that. And so that was that. And I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know if there's anybody else you want to hear about. And I will look forward to speaking to you soon. Have a great day. Love, peace and cash. Click that subscribe button before you go. It's not an option. You have to click the subscribe button. I've been told by the gods of YouTube that you have to click the subscribe button. Help me out. I'm trying to reach 1,500 people here. If I get to 1,500, I'm going to go for 2,000. I've never done this before, so help me out. Come on, click the subscribe button, and there'll be loads of more of these stories for you, and you can have a good laugh, or you can listen to them in the car when you're bored. All right? God bless you guys. Thank you. See you later.